7 veteran Hong Kong activists are facing jail. They've been convicted of organising and taking part in anti-government protests in 2019. For a closer look, we're joined by international and independent China strategist Andrew Leung from Hong Kong. Andrew, how will the court rulings affect the democracy movement in Hong Kong now?
Well, first of all, I won't comment on the legal argument in the court ruling because an appeal is quite likely to a higher courts. But I would comment on what your question was: is the impact on the whole democratic movement? Because this is a rather huge irony, because the one man, one vote universal suffrage was on the cards, was actually an offer package under Hong Kong's basic law, Hong Kong's constitution in 2015. And let's not forget that the joint declaration between Beijing and London did not include universal suffrage. It was on Beijing's initiative that such a proviso, such a provision was included in Hong Kong's constitution. But there is a very important condition. The condition is that the candidates must be pre-screened, because with all this kind of anti-government sentiments and the complete lack of trust between Beijing and the Hong Kong people, Beijing felt it was necessary to include this proviso into the joint declaration, into the, not the joint declaration, into the basic law. However, when this package was offered, it was rejected by the Pan-Democrats as undemocratic. Of course, it's not democratic by the Western standards, but that's Hong Kong's deal. However, having rejected this package, then the democratic movement more into a violent protest, sort of ransacking the legislature and then treading on Beijing's red lines, combined with the fact that the whole generation of young people have lost their sense of nationhood. They do not regard themselves as of Chinese nationality. They're just Hong Kongers. And then there is a perception that during the violent protests in 2019, all the way to 2020, the whole city was being held to ransom, the law and order, together with China's sense of national security. And hence, that's what happened, sort of trying to what Beijing terms as a reform of the legislature, and after the imposition of a draconian national security law. But that's the consequence. So this is a sequence of events that the Pan-Democrats probably thought of more than they could chew. And then, as I said, they forsook something better in return for something worse.
Andrew, the US and other Western countries have been increasingly critical of China. What effect will today's ruling have on relations?
Well, obviously, the United States has just passed the Hong Kong Democracy Act kind of report, repeating Americans' grave concern and criticism of what is seen to be an erosion of Hong Kong's democracy. But I think that this is, again, an ironic interpretation of democracy in Hong Kong, because Hong Kong's democracy cannot be equated to a democracy in the United States or in other Western countries. Don't forget that Hong Kong is not a country. And then Hong Kong's democratic movement has got to be governed by this constitution. And for the Pan-Democrats to just thrash all these safeguards in the hope of holding Beijing to ransom with this kind of mutual destruction techniques, the so-called 35 plus kind of formula, whereby they would seize control, first of all, in the district elections, and then also through blocking every proposal in the legislature to force the resignation of the chief executive so that they could seize power and coerce Beijing into changing the rules in their favor. But of course, Beijing would have nothing of that, and Beijing sees that as a threat to national security, and that's what's happened. But I think the West, without perfectly understanding that Hong Kong's constitution doesn't give Hong Kong people a free-for-all, but that's the reality.
Many thanks for sharing your thoughts with us, Andrew Leung, from Andrew Leung International Consultants in Hong Kong.